I'm Gretchen McKay. Many people call me Makosi Gogo. Gogo is grandmother, so I am at that age now.
Yes, and you are a grandma.
I am. So it's a term of respect. So to call me Makosi Gogo is one of showing respect.
So, how long have you been doing the healing work that you do? Although it's changed. When did you begin?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think for most of us that can look at our work now and go back, probably it all began when I was a young woman and took different forms. But I was drawn to shamanism in about 1994 and explored it for just my own health and well-being. And then, about 1999, I met the man who would become my mentor. He was from Swaziland, Baba P.H. Munchali, and he threw the bones for me. And in that, he said, I was asking him about my career. I was a teacher, and I was done. But what else are you supposed to do? I'm supposed to get my retirement money.
Yeah, right. That's what you do.
That's what you do. And he said, well, you're a doctor, which panicked me because I've always been afraid of science. So I said, I can't go back to school. And he said, no, my dear, a traditional doctor. And that's really where it began. What did that mean from a different cultural perspective? So the next year I went and began training with him in Swaziland. And I went back 2 summers and graduated as a Sangoma the second summer. My work's changed since then, so that's kind of the turning point. I've done a lot of studying here with shamanic teachers and practitioners. But that work as a Sangoma really led me to the focus of my work being with ancestors. And now I see, all these years later, that it really is about helping people reconnect to the past for a more healed present and for the future. That's 7 generations back and 7 generations in the future. How do I facilitate that kind of healing for people? So that's...
I like that. 7 generations back and 7 generations forward.
I remember PH told me early on, he said, there'll come a time when you throw the bones and you'll know the answers before they hit the mat. And I thought, yeah, right. He's right. I do know the answers before. I hear it. But there's something really powerful in the story that the bones tell.
So tell us about what the bones are, about this form of divination of throwing the bones.
I should show you.
You should show us.
Here, so the bones show people. The shells and the other objects have been chosen over time to help me tell the story. Here's me. Here's you. Here's Billy. Observing everything, our photographer. This tells me this work is really, it's your next place. You're going to be doing a lot more of this. This is really powerful.
You just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, this is a #1 thing with all of your ancestors lining up around you. This is Star Nations over here. And this is about you changing things through words, you being able to really speak words. And here's your soul's path, this little one up here. So you can see how it's just the door is open for you.
Wide.
And it's facing this
the
direction.
Door.
I know. And that's
my
east. That's east. So it's a new beginning.
I love it. That's so great.
And for me, it's interesting, here is me. This is about my story changing as well. And about moving into some new things. So you're really opening the door for me
love
and
it.
and however that plays out.
I love it. The leg. I mean, I don't know what that is, but
Traveling.
it's it's
Traveling.
giving you legs.
Movement.
It's movement. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
so cool.
So sometimes we start with a ritual. Lots of times I start with asking them to build an ancestral altar at home.
Mm-hmm.
Intention is everything.
Yeah.
So my intention is to create a safe and sacred space, both with me and something doable for themselves so they can begin to take steps toward healing.
Yeah, so you're giving them tools that
Mhm.
they don't only need you, it's their process.
No. In fact, I might, maybe when I'm doing a soul retrieval or some kind of physical energy extraction or bringing soul essence back, I'm a good tool for them to have. But if they haven't set a clear intention, and if they haven't done their work in preparing or don't intend to continue their work afterwards, I might as well not waste my time or theirs.
Yeah.
So it really is, it's a dance. It's a dance to find balance. And I think that's what we're always moving toward. How do I facilitate someone finding balance?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's at the beginning of their journey or later on. What I see with people that I'm working with is, a PH said this a long time ago when he visited the United States. He said, there are many traditional healers here, but everybody's lost their ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had lost mine. I knew all about African history and African American history, and I denied my own ancestral lineage, which is interesting. I always laugh. I had to go 10,000 miles to find my own ancestors.
Yeah.
I mean, my own biological ancestors. So that's, I know that's one of the key things for me, is to help people find out what that means for them. And it doesn't take a whole lot to start healing one's ancestral lineage.
Mm-hmm.
When a person sees patterns, and it can be anything from money, lack of money, divorce, health issues.
And these are obvious things, because you can say, my
Obvious.
parents did the same thing.
Exactly.
My grandparents did the same thing.
Exactly. You see it happening over and over again. That's a really good sign that something happened in the lineage. I actually had this wonderful couple from Serbia visit me recently, and they were talking about in their culture in Serbia, especially the elderly women, if someone does something bad in the family, they will, when they're bringing the sheep in at night, they'll set a bucket out. And they count until one of the sheep knocks over the bucket. And when, say, the fourth sheep kicked over the bucket, they will know that 4 generations down the line.
So the sheep are sort of like an oracle for them, in a way.
Yes,
I love
exactly.
that.
And I thought, oh my goodness. I mean, 4 generations later, you don't even know what anybody did.
No.
So I think that's the power of this now. We're in a time where we understand that if our DNA can absorb trauma, well, it can also release trauma.
Yeah.
And the trauma doesn't have to be ours.
Yeah. And so say 7 generations back, there's trauma you don't know. And you're manifesting it in your life,
Right.
and you can't figure out how to move forward.
Exactly.
And you can't figure out why you keep attracting
No matter what you do.
this situation. And it's because it's in the ancestral
Yeah.
lineage, which is in our DNA.
Right.
And so how do we heal that? What do we do?
Well, that's a process too.
Yeah.
I mean, 20 years later, I'm still working on that. Awareness is everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I always say, first an issue has to be revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can find a way to release it, and then it can be transformed.
So how will we release? What are some of your techniques you use for releasing that?
So I always have people begin by creating an altar at home.
Mm-hmm. For their ancestors.
For their ancestors.
And so what might that look like? I know everybody would be really different, but just to sort of, how would someone
a traditional, in an African way, it would be, from where I am, where other Sangomas do it with different colors. So I will tell you what PHI's had me do. Use a white cloth, a white candle.
I think you had me do this when I first
okay.
Yeah.
And maybe some pictures of loved ones who are gone. No one living on the altar. This is dead people only.
Yeah.
And then spend, I'll often have people spend 7 days lighting their candle and just talk to their ancestors. Just talk to them. So you get the ball rolling. I will often tell someone to do some bathing ritual or steaming ritual. I recognize that here we're reintroducing people to perhaps what was traditional for all of our ancestors at one time but isn't now. So yeah, the idea is to set the intention, to create a relationship with your ancestors, to start a dialogue. Paige used to say you have to turn your radio on. If you don't turn the radio on, you won't hear anything.
Receive the messages. And so setting the altar is a way of turning the radio on. It's sort of syncing up the energy with the ancestors, creating a portal.
Right, it is. And it's so much fun to watch people do this because we'll talk about where their ancestors originally came from. That's a big deal too. You know, everybody comes here generations ago and nobody tells the stories. So the stories are forgotten. Nobody knows. So I'll suggest that they do some research. And that might mean maybe you have a story about having ancestors that were Cherokee, for instance. Then learn about the Cherokee.
Yeah.
Not just the long walk, you know, not the ugly stuff, but learn about who they are. Who were they in their own country? Where did they come from? And I've loved it when I've seen people go to maybe the elders in the family that nobody ever asks any questions of. They'll go to them, they'll ask questions, and they'll find out amazing information. I've heard stories where people will say they made one phone call to an aunt and someone else sent them a bunch of pictures, you know.
That they never would have thought about.
Never would have thought about. The ancestors will take care of that part. Some people's ancestry for many generations is rather dark. It is. And when that's the case, I may begin with a ritual that I do at the ocean that's a little more focused and intentional. I see that as part of my work too, helping people remember what it feels like to be out in nature, whether it's a tree in your backyard or it's the ocean or it's the forest, to go with intention and offerings. I mean, what does that all mean? Our ancestors all knew that.
Right.
Yeah. But what if it becomes a sacred task you do for you? And that's another piece of this whole healing process. It's not about something just outside of you. Usually it comes down to some really big issues for all of us. Abandonment, shame, guilt. And where did that come from? Usually we're not the first generation.
Right.
So how do we find a way to love ourselves unconditionally? How can we love others unconditionally if we don't love ourselves? And I think that probably is the trickiest piece. And so when you talk about healing the ancestors, I really believe that we're guided outside of ourselves. Something external happens, something that we want to have control over. So we seek answers because it's too big. We can't handle it anymore. We want to change. Not everybody has the courage to do what it takes.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it does take courage. It's not an easy walk to start to really look at who you are, who you're becoming. But one of my teachers, Sandra Ingerman, always says, it's who we become that changes the world, not what we do.
I like
So,
that.
yeah, I do too. So really that's what we're doing. It begins because we want to change something outside of ourselves. But the real work is within.
As far as the ancestors go, angels, spirits, beings, are they affected by time and space?
No. Do our ancestors evolve? And he said, well, of course. Matter of fact, of course. Oh, so what we do, what we heal, what we change for a family, for a lineage, does make a difference both ways. Especially when, if we can wrap our head around that time is an illusion anyway, and maybe we're living 5 different lives at the same time, that's why we go back and forth, between them. Then there's no time continuum with the ancestors, but evolution of the soul is what's going on.
Yeah.
So it goes.
Yeah.
So going forward is so important, what we do.
Well, and that's it. I think that's what Okay, so that's another really important lesson they're teaching me right now about descendants. Descendants, I mean, I know that physically I can see it in my grandchildren, and it makes me think about that much more deeply. But what kind of world do we leave behind? And is it really behind? May each of us find the joy that's waiting for us, just outside our doors and inside our hearts.